People say I talk about some weird stuff, some far out stuff. But how about that chair that you're sitting in isn't solid? How weird is that? This reality is nothing like we think it is.
When I saw what Icke is doing, I was a bit jealous on him. Wow, look at what this guy's doing.
I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually.
We are in a period now where speaking your truth is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here. The world needs renegades, and it needs them now.
Hello and welcome to this David Icke Connector videocast. Well, I had some sad news this week when I heard what was frankly expected, that the legendary campaigner against child abuse, elite child abuse often, Robert Greene, had died. I'd known that he was seriously ill, but his family would, at that time, rather have not made that public. And then, very shortly before his death, the news started to circulate that this extraordinary man had left us. How apt that within minutes, really, of me getting the confirmation that Robert had died, that the news was awash with pictures of Julian Assange being manhandled out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London and put on trial for skipping bail on charges that he says are false, which appeared out of Sweden in the period that WikiLeaks was circulating some extraordinary information, confirming what some of us already knew, but putting substance and pictures before the public of nothing less than war crimes by the United States in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. It was apt because of everything that Robert Greene stood for. And that was, no matter what the personal cost for you, just do what you believe and what you know to be right. Robert Greene was just getting on with his life. Wasn't into any of this whole area that eventually took over that life. But then he was asked to help some people in Scotland, in particular a Down syndrome girl called Holly Gregg, to expose the systematic sexual abuse that she says she was forced to endure by some famous people in the Scottish elite. And I use that word elite in quote marks because actually they are the dregs of the dregs of the dregs of the cesspit, and their like operate all over the world. Now, Robert Greene could have looked at that and said, "Oof, not for me, mate. I can see the consequences for me here of taking this lot on." But he didn't. He went for it ferociously. It led to him being jailed for, in effect, trying to expose what had happened, and thus what is still happening and is happening to other people. And from that, he expanded into campaigning for justice on behalf of a long, long list of people who had been abused as children, often by the rich and famous, and people who'd had their children taken from them by the mafia that so much of social services has become. It's hard to contemplate the emotional trauma that comes from seeing your children taken from you by state agents, often psychopathic thugs, if the truth be told, while they're screaming for their mum and their dad. And those kids are then put into foster homes and permanently adopted, while their parents are not allowed to see them. And a lot of this comes from, well, lots of reasons, but to keep on this particular subject, it comes from making claims that your child or children have been sexually abused by a paedophile father or through some satanic paedophile ring. And what happens is the doors slam to stop any of it coming out. And so the person who is trying to expose it becomes the villain and takes the consequences, while those actually doing it get away scot-free. I've been investigating this sort of stuff for 30 years. It happens all over the world. And only those who really care about what is right, what is just, what is fair, will stay the course. Because there's many, many encouragements not to. There's abuse, there's ridicule, there's efforts to silence you. All these things go on. And a lot of people come into this arena and the wider arena of conspiracy research, and the kitchen gets too hot pretty damn quickly, and they're off. Robert Greene was not one of those people. And he represented what is necessary today more than ever before. People who are willing to say, I'm going to do what I believe to be right, what I know to be right, irrespective of the cost to me. Because once you say, okay, if I do this, what I believe to be right, what are the consequences for me? You're finished then. Because once you actually allow that thought, that possibility to enter your perception, then you're going to start self-censoring to protect yourself from the perceived consequences. And you'll censor more and censor more and censor more, and eventually you'll be impotent in making any difference. What we need is people with the determination and fortitude of Robert Greene, who, despite being thrown into prison for doing what he believed to be right, and then coming out, knowing it could happen again, he still continued to do what he knew to be right. He didn't abandon people on the basis of, oh, well, yeah, it's not right, but what will happen to me? He just did it. And we are seeing today a outright, openly declared war on such people and the information that they are circulating and the injustices that they are challenging. And seeing Julian Assange carried out forcibly from the Ecuadorian embassy into the hands of the British police, in other words, the British establishment, on behalf of the American establishment, was such a visual confirmation of what we're now facing. In every area of information communication, the censors are at work. This week, the UK government that did that to Assange has announced that it wants to have an overseer of the internet to basically decide what people can see and can't see, something I've been warning about for a very, very long time. We have this elite-owned Silicon Valley mafia involving Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube and Amazon and so on, who are systematically censoring and blocking the circulation of information that their masters demand that they censor. And a lot of them are very happy to do it. We've had Mark Zuckerberg coming out in the last few days demanding that governments regulate the internet. Because people may have ridiculed me and dismissed me for all these years, but there is a conspiracy to enslave humankind. And that conspiracy has at its foundation, along with everything else, the control of what you see and don't see. What WikiLeaks did, and I don't agree with everything that WikiLeaks has done. I don't agree with putting out documents that can get innocent people in serious trouble without redacting that information. But what WikiLeaks has done has revealed to the world in provable, documentable fact that this human society is run by lying psychopaths who put on a face to the world of morality, of values. How many times have you heard this Silicon Valley mafia and its highly paid frontmen and gophers. Talk about values. Oh, it's against our values. You don't have any. And certainly, governments don't. That's why they're there. And so WikiLeaks, not just through documents, but through video, showed how American troops were killing innocent civilians and basically having a good time doing it. Irrespective of if they were responsible for anything, no, don't matter. Just take them out. Hey, nice one. That's the mentality that is running our world. And even that mentality is not in the same psychopathic league as those in the shadows who are driving all this. And when you see the scale of sheer undiluted evil that we're dealing with, the sheer contempt that it has for human life, human suffering, then not everyone has a backbone that will stand up to that level of psychopathic evil. But we must. We must. Because if we don't, it will prevail completely. And that's why I may not agree with everything that people do that challenge the system. I might not agree with the way they see things. I might not agree with some of their actions, but they have my complete and total respect for having the basic decency to stand up against this and not melt, fold and scuttle away thinking, what are the consequences for me? And Robert Greene personified all of those things. No matter the effect on his life, no matter what the system did to him, the abuse he often got from the enlightened, and sometimes the way he was treated by even some of those that he was trying to help. But it didn't matter to him. Just as it doesn't matter to me. It's not that you're doing something primarily to help someone, because you'll get disappointed if you do that sometimes, because they might turn on you. Some people do. No, you're not doing it to help someone primarily. You're doing it because you believe it is right, it is decent, it is the just thing to do. And then when some people turn on you, who you're trying to help, well, okay, but that doesn't matter, because you didn't do it to help a single person. You did it because you believed it was right and just and fair to do that. And so you go and do it for someone else, and you'll do it again for those even who turn on you, and then come back and say, well, will you help me again? And that's what Robert Greene did. I used to sit here and maybe 2-3 times a week, sometimes, an email would come with another letter that Robert had written to some person in authority on behalf of someone being abused by the system. Someone had suffered indescribable sexual and physical abuse as a kid, some of it still ongoing. He didn't walk away. He said, what can I do? And that's why it's so sad to see the passing of Robert Greene, because he was the attitude, the unbreakable spirit, despite everything, that this world needs in abundance now. Because we are facing an endgame for freedom. Something I predicted in my books 30 years ago. Oh, that Icke's mad. What that Robert Greene's saying about what happened there, he's mad. But then it turns out to be true. We are facing the endgame of freedom. And certainly the endgame for the very foundation of freedom. Freedom of expression. Freedom of thought. Freedom of opinion. The idea, which is where this is all leading, if we go on sitting on our asses or walk away saying, oh, this kitchen's hot in it, where it's leading is the point where no one ever hears anything or sees anything that the system doesn't want them to see and hear. That's where it's going. And that's why freedom of speech is in the gun sights of these psychopaths. Because while freedom of speech exists, that end goal of controlling all information that people hear and see is not possible. Because while you've got freedom of speech, you can challenge it. You can challenge the official narratives, the official lies. And so freedom of speech has to go. And ironically, much of it is being driven by mind-controlled, perceptually programmed, quote, progressives who target freedom of speech at every turn through things like political correctness and all the nonsense that goes with that. They cannot see that their freedom is disappearing while they're cheering and punching the air. So freedom and justice, and certainly abused children in Britain, lost a fantastic champion this week with the passing of Robert Greene. And the best tribute that can be paid to him is that others step forward and take his place. Because this isn't going away unless we make it go away. It's going to get worse unless we stiffen the backbone and say, we're not having it. To the day that I pass on, which is a long time from now, I'll tell you that, I won't be giving up. Because once you give up, what you're giving up is freedom. Not just for yourself. You're giving up freedom for your kids and grandkids that have got to live in this world, getting more and more dystopian. By the minute, what's it going to be like for them? 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Unthinkable. So it's been quite a week for putting in front of us this war on freedom of expression, this war on freedom. And how ironic and how sad that one of the great champions of justice has passed on. And I'll say this, Robert, wherever you are, mate, You'll be demanding justice for all around you because it's the only thing you know. And from me, thanks for everything you did, for all the people you did it for, because you did, in your own way, leave the world a better place than you found it.
The world needs renegades, and it needs them now.